Good evening, everybody. President Trump up against a resistance, but it's not the radical Dems who are the problem. It's the rhino Republicans standing in the president's path. Senator Lindsey Graham informing the president he must be willing to work with the Dems to pass his immigration agenda. Mitch McConnell offering the president only, if you can call it support, tepid support. The president needs to forget about fighting with the radical Dems for a time and take on the obstruction within his own party. And the Department of Homeland Security seems to be out of control. The department's searching for companies to help with its proposed release of hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants into American cities. The DHS plan standing in direct conflict with the president's America First agenda, the will of the American people, and expresses some lack of confidence in a secure border becoming a reality. Attorney General William Barr today speaking about his efforts to uncover the corrupt conspiracy to overthrow the Trump presidency.
I think people have to find out what the government was doing during that period. If we're worried about foreign influence, for the very same reason we should be worried about whether government officials abuse their power and put their thumb on the scale. And so I'm not saying that happened, but I'm saying that we have to look at that.
The Attorney General talking with Bill Hemmer. An all-star lineup here tonight. Political savant Ed Rollins, Sebastian Gorka, Pastor Robert Jeffress among our guests. And our top story tonight, President Trump expressing optimism that the Democratic Party may actually back his immigration plan. He tweeted this: "The Democrats now realize there is a national emergency at the border and that if we work together, it can be immediately fixed. We need Democratic votes and all will be well." The president's fight, however, may not be just with the Dems, certainly. Take a look at the rhino resistance he faces within his own party. Senator Lindsey Graham, first among them, lecturing the president on what to do with his immigration plan, namely capitulate to the Dems on DACA, hence the senator's nickname, Senator Gramnesty. The Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the only person in Congress with the power to push the president's plan forward, not backing the president, issuing instead a feeble statement that reads in part, quote, "We are a nation of immigrants and we must preserve that rich part of who we are. But we are a nation of laws," he ultimately acknowledges. "I look forward to reviewing the president's proposal." Joining us tonight, former Reagan White House political director, Fox Business political analyst, Ed Rollins. Ed, let's talk first about the rollout. The president talking about Democrats as if they were now willing to ignore everything that Pelosi and Schumer have said over the course of the past month or so. What make you of it?
My sense is there's some positive things in the rollout, but it's long term. Democrats aren't going to cooperate at the end of the day. They're not going to do anything to increase the border security and the wall. That's very critical. Republicans are going to be all over the place as we see. And my sense is
Pelosi said dead on arrival.
Well,
period.
I think she probably is predicting what her members are going to do, particularly in the House. And the Senate obviously is not going to carry the ball by itself. The key thing here is why this is out here, and it certainly has some goals in it. The president can't take his eye off the ball, and he won't take his eye off the ball of building that wall and dealing with the problem right today, which he has to do by executive order and everything else. If he doesn't do that, and he tries to get legislation, spends a lot of time and energy doing that, he'll get the temptation is there to get distracted.
Let's look at this full screen of Mitch McConnell's statement today. This part I'd like you, if you would, to analyze for us. The majority leader saying, quote, "We are a nation of immigrants and we must preserve that rich part of who we are, but we are a nation of laws. Look forward to reviewing the president's proposal." The last sentence seems to me to suggest he wasn't part of the construction of that proposal. He wasn't part of the buy-in that apparently was being sought by the White House. And we are, as people are often remind us, a nation of immigrants. These platitudes are really poorly placed at a time where we're trying to fashion a way forward on immigration, border security, and to deal with, frankly, a meritocracy in our immigration system.
Well, Obviously Jared Kushner ran this show along with Steve Miller, who really is the expert. The mistake is always when it has to get through the Congress and you don't have anybody from the Congress in there basically buying off some of it. I don't believe in the gang of 6 or the gang of 8 or anything like that, or letting the Democrats run with it. But at the same time, to put something out there that becomes dead on arrival is not in the president's best interest, unless it's a talking point for his campaign. And I think that Jared doesn't understand politics and doesn't understand the Hill, how it works. So my sense today is the goals are good objectives. Long term, they should be there. But I come back to the point, let's not take our eye off the ball. We have a very serious problem today. Until you basically enhance that border security and continue that commitment to those men and women who are holding back the line, you're never going to get anything.
The idea that a government cannot walk and chew gum at the same time, to put it in corny, hackneyed terminology, is a disaster waiting for the president. That border has to be secured.
Right.
The interior enforcement has to be carried out against the hundreds of thousands of people who are sitting under court orders requiring their removal from the United States. This is madness, because it operates as a magnet as you're trying to create a polar opposite in policy on immigration.
And the idea of taking people who are basically come across the border and got a court date 2 years or 3 years down, we're going to move them around the cities around the country, is absolutely absurd. I mean, we've got to stop them at the border. We've got to send them back home until they get cleared, which may never happen. You're just inviting people to come, get your pass, go in and try and find them. It doesn't work.
And nothing is happening as a result of the Ninth Circuit Court supporting the president's policy on remain in Mexico. There is no announced public response to that order when it should be going forward as a part of policy and being implemented, and I mean now, by the new leadership at DHS, if indeed it turns out that's what it is. Let's turn to Flynn, the White House, former White House National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Now, a couple of things. One, under surveillance much sooner than we thought he had been, and secondly, much more cooperative with the special counsel than had been previously recognized. Why was the president, in your judgment, kept in the dark here?
Well, he never should have been kept in the dark. The FBI should have, especially after you've been elected, they should have sat down with him and said, here's what's going on. President Obama, he had a long session, and apparently Obama said, we had some objections, don't hire Flynn, but never gave any reasons. The reality is Flynn
Sally Yates from the Justice Department as well. But they didn't say your National Security Advisor designate is under investigation by the FBI.
And equally as important, James Baker, who's been running around all the shows the last couple of days, said that they didn't have any evidence on him, that basically the investigation hadn't gone anywhere, and they kept it open after he had met with the Russian ambassador. But my sense is Flynn was...
These people are lying through their teeth. Okay, let's just start right there. This is all rationalization. It is all creative construction of events that we know precisely where they were headed.
Right.
They meant to entrap a president and overthrow him.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And the reality is that the president has had to fight for 2 years now to basically keep moving forward, and he has. But no president has ever had this kind, and I lived through the Watergate system, no president has ever been under this kind of scrutiny and distraction.
This
still has done a superb job.
I will not diminish Watergate and its import historically. But this is so much bigger, so much more profound,
it's way bigger.
Abuse of power. And for it not to be resolved means that the Democratic Party has been in league with the people who have been covering up, either directly, indirectly, over the course of 2.5 years.
And I have to think someone at the top level of the White House, whether it was the president or Susan Rice or someone, basically signed off on all of this.
Well, we know that the communications between Strzok and Page suggest it was the White House, and it's pretty clear who at the White House had the authority to compel the actions that were taken by these politically corrupt members of the FBI and Department of Justice leadership. Ed Rollins, as always, great to have you here. Thank you,
sir. Nice weekend.
You too. Still ahead, President Trump having fun today, taking apart the agenda of the 2020 radical dim presidential hopefuls.
They have 25 people now running for the office of president, and some of these people are stone cold crazy. They have a $100 trillion Green New Deal. Nobody has any idea what the hell it is. They know that you can't take a plane anymore. You have to take a train to Hawaii. A train to Australia and a train. Hey, if they can't build from San Francisco to Los Angeles, what's going to happen when they say, let's build a train to Europe?
Also tonight, why Game of Thrones could cause millions of Americans to call in sick Monday. I'm not saying they will. Could. Just could. We'll have much more on that right after this quick break. Stay with us. A split federal appellate court ruling against the Trump administration's decision to end the Obama-era DACA program. A three-judge panel in this Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Virginia ruled 2-1 that the president did not follow appropriate administrative procedures. Oh my gosh. The Supreme Court is now weighing whether to hear three other cases that challenge the president's relocate and transport 225,000 illegal immigrants to shelters across the country in some number of years in the future. ICE is looking to hire a contractor to transport 60,000 immigrants each year. ICE also being criticized for releasing nearly 10,000 illegal immigrants into the United States over just the past 8 days. They should be criticized. This is irresponsible and it is beyond dumb. Between May 6th and May 13th, ICE has released more than 1,000 illegal immigrants a day into society. Most were released in Texas, Arizona, and California. Joining us tonight, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, radio host, author, former strategist to President Trump, and it is great to see you, my friend. Thanks for being here. You can't make up what is happening right now to this administration. This story about ICE contracting 225,000 immigrants to be transported by a contractor to be named based on, I guess, bidding. Your thoughts?
Look, this is outrageous. If you look at the figures that are coming officially from those inside ICE and DHS that are allowed to make the statements publicly, half of the time of the CBP agents on the border is used to babysit and look after illegal immigrants. These are the people who are charged. They're given a badge, a gun, and a uniform to protect the national sovereignty of our borders and to catch criminals, to catch illegal aliens, and now we're busing them. I mean, look, the Democrats don't want to fix this, and it looks as if there are members of the swamp inside the system that are doing everything they can to stymie the president.
And it's also very clear that that the resistance within the Rhino wing of the Republican Party, it's actually more than a wing, it's almost the entire bird. Without the party's cohesion and unity, this becomes next to impossible. It looks like the proposition is on the part of the Trump White House to assure that the Republicans come together and then bring in the Democrats. But now the president is saying the Democrats are willing to join them. What do you make of it?
All I know is, Lou, that yesterday the president presented a very, very reasonable, common sense plan. When normal average Americans hear that only less than 16% of people coming into our country legally come based upon merit, that we still have a lottery for diversity, we have to shut this down. If Australia, Lou, if Canada can have incredibly stringent merit-based immigration structures, so can we. And the idea that the majority, you're right, it's the majority of the bird, it's not the wing, it's the fuselage, it's half of the plane or more, is not behind the president after 50 years of not reforming this system. It's scandalous, Lou.
Well, and all the more scandalous because this is a historic president already. What he's accomplished in 2.5 years it's unparalleled, and
it's remarkable.
And for the, if you will, the McConnell elements of the party, the K Street governed elements of the Republican Party, not to be on board with this president from Jump Street is outrageous. And it's as if the ghost of Paul Ryan hangs over not only the House, but the Senate.
Yeah. I asked exactly this question from the president recently, and he said, very graciously, surprised me, he said, you know, Sebastian, they're more supportive than you would think. Okay, maybe, but from the outside, I think you're right. It's like Scrooge, the ghost of Marley and Marley, the ghost of Paul Ryan is walking through the halls of Congress. Give Mitch McConnell his due with regards to the judges, but judges aren't enough. We have a national crisis, and the GOP needs to get behind this president, or in 2020, they're going to lose their seats as well.
And as we're talking about the importance with all of these deportation orders for hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants who are at large in our society without consequence and without any risk right now of those orders being carried out, we have Ilhan Omar, the Congresswoman, calling again for the abolition of immigration and customs enforcement. She is now the leading open borders advocate and outrageous radical Dem calling for the end of immigration and customs enforcement. And apparently the Democratic Party is taking her very, very seriously, her anti-Semitism as well.
This is a rank anti-Semite. Ilhan Omar is proud of her anti-Semitism. Today, she not only said ICE needs to be abolished, Lou, we had the audio on my show. We also had her say there is no such thing as an illegal alien. There is no such thing. Just open the borders, let everybody in, I guess, and then you'll have enough people to vote the Democrats into power forever.
And that seems to be where we're headed, because the border is obviously right now, illegal immigrants are flooding across it. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is releasing illegal immigrants into society because they simply cannot hold them in detention centers any longer, and contracting for the next 5 years to move another 250,000, almost 250,000 illegal immigrants throughout the United States. It's just stunning to contemplate where we are right now in this national emergency. And the Democrats refuse to acknowledge it. The Republicans seem to have it, if the president had not ordered his White House to come up with a plan, we'd be sitting here watching this without either border security or a plan to actually come up with a workable immigration system, workable in the sense that it would be in the national interest as the president's plan is.
That last point is crucial. Imagine if we didn't have Donald Trump as the president. Hillary Clinton actually gave a speech in which she talked about having no borders, a borderless North America. The most repugnant thing of all, Lou, is the lack of honesty. The GOP may lack a spine, but the Democrats say they're the compassionate ones. This is the party that is facilitating the coyotes, has no problem with the rape, sexual assault of the women and the minors, has no problem with children being rented out by their parents to be used as props so that family units, quote unquote, come across the border. The Democrats don't care about people. It's about political power.
And to put a cap on this thing, for every day that border is not secure is another day in which the Mexican drug cartels are commanding and controlling that border, and nothing is happening on either side of that border, or certainly as they cross that border. That control is entirely in the hands of the deadliest That steep slide in a southern Spanish town, they were pretty excited about it until it opened. And then just one day after it opened, as you watch these folks come down and get, well, plowed into and fly. Look at that. Where are the brakes? Well, just one day after it opened, the 125. Where are the brakes? Well, just one day after it opened, the 125-foot slide that was meant to give people a quick way to travel between two streets and have a little fun, they closed it. People started posting videos like this and pictures of their injuries, and I guess even in Spain, the legal claims started mounting up quickly. Up next, China uses Tinseltown to wield its influence over not only the Hollywood elite, but a nation. We'll have the story right after these quick messages. Stay with us. Red storm rising, China expanding its influence in Hollywood. Testifying before Congress yesterday, Christopher Walker, he's the vice president for the National Endowment for Democracy, said that China is flat out using Hollywood to spread its influence and its propaganda. Walker saying this, quote, "The Chinese government has trained its attention on Hollywood, where its presence shapes the industry in ways both visible and unseen. This leads, he said, to content either edited to fit the Chinese market or proactively shaped to exclude anything the Chinese government might consider sensitive in the first place." Chinese co-productions also more likely, he said, to feature positive depictions of China. Well, joining us tonight to figure all of this out is Morgan Wright, former senior advisor in the State Department's Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program, former law enforcement advisor to the Republican National Committee's cybersecurity expert. Great American. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Lou.
Let's start with this story that is just now coming in. A day after President Trump signed an executive order that banned Huawei from operating in the United States and protected our technology, we're told that the Commerce Department is giving Huawei a reprieve for 90 days at least. What is going on? We've just had the example of ZTE. Right. Xi Jinping implored the president not to effectively kill the company, so he didn't, out of the goodness of his heart. Now, the similar thing is happening with Huawei.
Yeah, I've worked with a couple of large technology companies like Alcatel-Lucent and Cisco. You just don't simply rip and replace a network out. It has to be phased over time. So this order, it probably would have been better had it been a phased order to say, look, in the first 90 days, you got to replace 25% of your supply chain, then 50, because people still have to keep their networks up and running. I mean, there's no way with these networks and with what they've got invested that they can do a hard cutover in one day to move to a completely different system. There's lag time, there's ordering.
It was my impression that the order banned the purchase or contracting of Huawei products from the moment of the order. Not that they would have to extricate the equipment or hardware from networks.
Yeah, but as things age out or as there's problems, things break down, things have faults, you have to replace that. And a lot of the equipment that goes into Huawei equipment comes from the United States. A lot of the chips, and they buy a lot of parts from the U.S. to do this. So,
by the way, much like ZTE did.
Yeah.
And so where are we? We seem to be caught it's more than a horn. It is just an absolute nightmare of a dilemma.
Right.
Where Huawei, we're going around the country telling people not to buy the equipment because they're going to compromise their networks and provide access to the communist Chinese, full access to espionage, spying on those networks, and yet we haven't got the wherewithal to shut down Huawei and our networks? You've got to be kidding me. How dumb are we?
Well,
first, let's start with how dumb are we?
I'm not an expert on that. However, Albert Einstein once said there's only two things infinite, the universe and stupidity. I'm not sure about the universe. So, right. Look, there's a lot of rural carriers, people who are price sensitive, and this is where this, like you're talking about with China and the film industry, they've been doing this in technology for a long time. It's their thing called death of a thousand cuts, Ling Chi. They just do a little bit here, a little bit there. If Huawei were forced to be a publicly traded company subject to scrutiny and regulations like all the other ones were, and they didn't get all the massive subsidies, you wouldn't see all these companies buying Huawei because they're cheaper. Why are they cheaper? Because the Central Committee, the Chinese Communist Party, the banks fund all they do. The metro system, I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, the metro system is looking at buying, guess what? Chinese-made metro cars. Why? Because they're cheaper. This is how they're killing us. We're dying the death of a thousand cuts. Now, maybe what President Trump did with this order wasn't the best way to do it, but I tell you, at least he laid down the gauntlet, he laid down a marker, and he said this far but no farther. We'll have to figure it out, but we cannot let China keep doing what they're doing and get away with it, because we will die the death of a thousand cuts.
Well, dying, whether it's by 1,000 cuts or one, it's death. And now we learn that Germany, France, and the Netherlands all say that they will not block Huawei from their 5G networks whatsoever. We're with reversing a presidential order. We're in a hell of a spot here. What do we do now?
I don't know. You know, if I had that answer, I'd be sitting in the White House, you know, making the calls like this. But I will tell you, but if you listen very carefully to what what Germany and UK and even the Netherlands said, they're not blocking them. However, they're still subject to security review, and the General Security and Intelligence Organization of the Netherlands has opened up an investigation into Huawei to look at these things. There's only one company in the world that has these investigations, and that's Huawei right now.
Morgan, you and I are good friends. I have great respect for you, but we know BS when we hear it, and that's BS coming from the Netherlands, from the UK, from France and Germany. That means they don't know what to do, and yet they're going to surveil. They're going to have to discover what Huawei is. You described what Huawei is at the opening moments of this discussion.
Look,
they are a PLA entity, subsidized, directed, and utterly reliant upon the Chinese Communist government.
They're an extension of the Chinese intelligence organs. They're an extension of the People's Liberation Army. In China, everything that's developed in China is expected to be shared with the government and the military. And so you've got Google, you've got Microsoft, you've got all these companies that are building stuff that are eventually ending up in the hands of the Chinese. I can't tell you why Germany, why the UK, why these. I'll tell you what concerns me, though, Lou, is the Five Eyes Alliance, us, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. We should be united behind this, preventing this, but we're still not getting the support from our own allies to keep Huawei out of these networks.
It looks like a number of those allies were involved in trying to overthrow the President of the United States, so that makes for some complicated discussion, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Morgan Wright, as always, instructive to talk with you, and we appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You bet, Lou.
Morgan Wright. Well, if you're thinking about skipping work Monday because you're going to have a bit of a hangover after Game of Thrones finale, you're certainly not alone. A new survey finds an estimated 10.7 million Americans are expected to call out sick following Sunday night's much-anticipated finale. For comparison, 17 million people took off the following Monday after last year's Super Bowl. 17 million. What in the world are we doing in this country? Up next, an F-16 crashed straight into a warehouse, leaving workers stunned, but most of them uninjured. China wants the United States to ease up on trade negotiations. They question our sincerity. Don't they question everything? I'm so sorry that we're not sufficiently sincere for the people who are stealing $500 million from us, our technology, our intellectual property. I'm sorry. If I may speak just for myself, I'm very sorry about that. We'll take that up after the break. Asia expert Gordon Chang joins us. Stay with us. You don't want to miss it. Media saying the United States must show respect and sincerity if it wants to hold any meaningful trade talks in the future. The Chinese are stealing U.S. technology, intellectual property rights, our weaponry, and by about $500 billion a year. They want the United States to, be in trade deficit with China in perpetuity, and now they want us to show them sincerity. Well, I sincerely would tell them to go to hell were it my decision. Joining us tonight, Gordon Chang, columnist, author, senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute. Good to have you with us. Partner, I've just about seen I am just up to here with the nonsense from the Chinese. Why in the world are we putting up with this kind of nonsense?
Yeah, I actually don't think we are going to put up with it because I don't see a trade deal coming.
Oh, hell, when I say put up with it, we've got business publications reporting from the Chinese point of view. Make that the communist Chinese point of view, the PLA point of view, the Communist Party's point of view against the President of the United States, U.S. interests, the national interests. The ignorance is overwhelming, and most of that ignorance reposes on Wall Street firms, the Koch brothers, the Chamber of Horrors, the Business Roundtable, and the K Street lobbyists who are peddling for pure money while Wall Street is betting its book, which now has, in many cases, 40% of that book is Chinese money.
Yeah, but what you're seeing now, Lou, is that a lot of these voices are really been quiet in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And the reason is that China has delegitimized them. Basically, what's happened is these guys were saying, oh, the Chinese want a trade deal, they're sincere, this is going to be working out well. And then all of a sudden, as we know at the beginning of the month, the Chinese withdrew the commitments across the board.
They reneged, they lied, and they broke their promises, and their word is not their bond. On Wall Street at least, sometimes they may be thievery. There may be thievery on Wall Street, but it usually, men and women on Wall Street at least keep their word. This is just outrageous.
Yeah, it is outrageous. And that's why these guys, the Koch brothers, the Chamber of Commerce, Business Roundtable, Wall Street, they've been very quiet. And the reason is China has cut the legs out from under them. And this is a good thing, because what it means is that those who want a resolute response to China are actually now driving things. And we're not going to have a trade deal for a very long time, Lou, because one of the things that's driving the Chinese right now, we don't know, but it seems like there's real problems in Beijing. It looks like Xi Jinping isn't able to force through a trade deal, which means we're not going to have a trade deal. And that's the best response for us.
Force through a trade deal. And we had Mnuchin running around saying we're in the concluding phase of these discussions. We had people in Wall Street clucking about trade tariffs, even though this is, 2% of GDP. It's ridiculous to even think about it. We watched $1.5 trillion disappear in the equities markets over what was basically $300 billion of affected product in tariffs. We're watching some of the strangest behavior that I could ever recall, both in terms of Wall Street, in terms of a principal trading partner, which is basically, and think about the absurdity of this, Gordon. We are trying to negotiate with a trading partner, and fundamental to that negotiation is we're begging them not to steal any more from us after they've been stealing from us for 20 years. We're begging for them not to push us into trade deficit as if we aren't in control of our own purchasing habits and spending. I mean, we look like a completely just innervated giant that can't control itself, so it's begging, as a victim that you not take advantage of us any further instead of, smashing them straight in the nose.
Yeah, well, one of the great things is that the President on Wednesday did have that Huawei order. The Commerce Department did put Huawei on the entities list, and I know I don't like the exemptions that we're going to see for the next couple months, but we're going in the right direction because essentially...
By reversing in 24 hours a presidential order to stop a company that we are telling our allies is going to commit espionage through the technology they're buying from a Chinese state-owned entity called Huawei. That's crazy.
No, but we're moving in the right direction, Lou.
The right direction.
And I know that would probably get you upset, but the point is...
The only thing that upsets me is illogic. I don't understand how that makes any sense when we're going backwards from defending the United States and its interests.
6 months from now, those exemptions will not be given. And the other good thing about this is you're having the president put the Chinese off their game because we're really hitting them. Wednesday was a really important day for the United States. We're going to see a lot of other punishments on the Chinese that they didn't think were coming. They thought we were a nation of bunny rabbits. No, we're not. And this is good. One of the things...
Wait a minute. This is going to be our war cry with the Chinese. We're not bunny rabbits. We're not bunny rabbits. Are you kidding?
No, I mean, the Chinese think that we're bunny rabbits, but probably no longer.
Don't give a damn what the Chinese think.
You got Trump as actually giving them a hard time. And one of the important things is, one, this is going on...
Wait a minute. The President of the United States is giving China a hard time. They're stealing $500 billion in intellectual property, weaponry. Are you kidding?
What's happening in this whole dispute...
And we're giving them a hard time as they steal that from us?
What's happening in this whole dispute, you're having U.S. companies reconsider their position in China, taking their factories out of it. We're disengaging. This is going in, let me use that phrase
Ladies
again,
and gentlemen,
the right
I want to
direction.
say to you right now, it's been a pleasure having Gordon Chang with us tonight, the emissary of equanimity. A new role for him, what I haven't quite gotten used to. Gordon, great to have you here. Thanks so much, my friend.
Thanks, Lou.
Some interesting news about the world's tiger population, and it is, frankly, sad news. According to a new report, more tigers are now living in cages than live in the wild around the world. Experts blame tiger farming, which is popular in places like Laos, where tigers are shot, killed, butchered, sold for thousands of dollars. Fewer than 4,000 tigers live in their natural habitats, while the number in captivity has exploded to 12,500. Up next, all but one radical Dem running for president, coming out against a flurry of new strict anti-abortion bills all across the country. We're going to take that up and much more right after this quick break. Pastor Robert Jeffress joins us here next. Stay with us. And joining us now to take up that question and much more, Harmeet Dillon, managing partner at the Dillon Law Group and Republican National Committee woman for the state of California. It's great to have you with us, Harmeet. Let's get to the president's question. Why? And we've received word that they've apparently, with the committee, worked out a deal where he will indeed appear for 1 to 2 hours and on a narrow basis respond to questions.
Well, I can't think of a proper legislative purpose or an oversight role for the Senate or the House to be asking further questions. This inquiry is over. The Democrats need to accept and come to terms with the fact that they lost and that there was nothing there. And the only thing that could be gained by hauling somebody in to retestify about something that he's already testified about before is to trap that person with some tricky question in a perjury trap. That's not a legitimate function. I'm really disappointed to see the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, going along with Senator Burr's abuse of this process.
And I think, as nearly the entire Republican Party, I would think, would be, if not the entire Republican Party. We know there are some exceptions made for rhinos, but this is obscene to watch. And to have Mitch McConnell standing there with Roy Blunt on one side and John Barrasso, the leadership of the Republican Party, saying he doesn't tell Burr what to do. As I said earlier in the broadcast, that's clear because we know that it's Mark Warner running the entire Senate committee. It's sickening to watch. I just can't imagine that he is going to be helpful on many issues at all beyond judges.
Right. Well, what can I say? I think we've seen the outer limits of what we can expect from these folks. It's disappointing. I hope that we get past this particular episode and move on. But, as we know, Lou, Democrats aren't willing to accept this. The whole point of this whole Russia hoax and inquiry was to gum up the wheels of power in Washington and make sure the president can't get his substantive agenda accomplished. And it's sad to see Republicans being complicit in that goal.
Yeah, McConnell should have been with his adjuncts beside him, demanding Mark Warner testify before that committee rather than continue to run it through it's deplorably weak, Senator Richard Burr. Let's turn to some bright news for the country as well as for the president here to see the investigators being investigated. The Attorney General doing exactly what he promised he would do with the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's going after the investigators and their corrupt origins of the witch hunt that amounted to persecution of this president for over 2 years.
Well, yes. So I'm encouraged to see the investigation started by Mr. Durham. But on the other hand, I want to put a caution out there, which is that it appears from a recent news article, and of course we don't know how accurate this is, but it looks like the initial reports coming out about this is that it's not actually going to be a full-fledged criminal investigation as yet. It's simply going to be a review of the existing evidence that's already been collected. And so I question if that's the role of this new investigation by U.S. Attorney Durham, whether that's really just redundant of what the Inspector General Horowitz is doing and some of the other work that's been done. Because without the prosecutorial power to subpoena, power to ask questions, we're really just rehashing old news and nothing is more going to happen. So I hope it's not the case that this is just a panacea to the right to make sure that something is being done, quote unquote, because without some prosecutions, nothing really will end up being done here.
If there are any gambits on this now, it'll be not only disappointing but destructive to the president's 2020 chances with the base. I mean, the president has been insistent to the degree that he can be. William Barr strikes me as a man of great integrity as well as talent. I don't know the man that Durham that he's put in place, but he has apparently he has a terrific reputation. Do you know him, and what do you think of him personally?
I do not know him personally. Professionally, he has an outstanding reputation, and so this is no criticism of him as an individual. It is a question of what powers is he being granted and what is his brief, what is he being asked to do. Now, of course, it could be the case that step one is you review the existing evidence and then determine whether you then want to bring somebody in front of a grand jury for an indictment. So hopefully that is the case, that this is going in phases. But if this is just sort of another Inspector General backward-looking effort, then it is meaningless, because unless people are held accountable, and I mean thrown in prison for violating